Welcome. I'm gonna have to re-record my lesson. Something happened along the lines. I'm not sure what the problem was. But here are the two programs that we want to work with before we move on to the last section of what our data structures do. So let's start by having the data structure that comes first. So we created a structure, and then in the second program we created a union. So let's create two new projects and we name them accordingly. So we go to next, we say TS union as the first program, and then we create a new project. We also call it DS structure. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through the code or go through the content that we want to work with. Let's start with the union. So our union works in this particular manner. We use the data type union, and then we put the name of the union, which can be numbers, and then we put our curly brackets so that we can define what our union should be. Then our union would then have the following content. The first element would be a set of numbers. We want an integer value, which will be I. We want a float value, which will be F. We also want a double value, which will be D. And each of these values, we don't give them a particular output. At the same time, we can also come to our main, and then we call this data type that we've created in this particular instance, which is a union. So this is a data type. It becomes similar to our variables in that we can actually give it a name, and then it can contain members. So these are actually referred to as members. And then these members would then be called at this particular point within our main, whereby we say union, and then we say numbers. As you can see, as I'm typing in, numbers actually shows up, and then we say N1 for our numbers. And this we then call accessing members in a union, like that. So to make it as simple as possible, we can actually then initialize each of these members in our main. So we can say n1 dot, and then we select the variable that we want, which is our I. We can say is equal to 10. We can also say n1 dot. So the dot helps us to pick the value that we want, and we can then input our equal sign to initialize whatever element we want to work with. So the last value would be our float, and we have that being equal to 67.932, and then we are done. We can then display what each of these members gives us by having a cout, and then we specify the result that we want. So it's n1, which will be our integer. We then say int value, like that. We also do the same with the next value, which is our float value. So we say float value. We then say n1.if for our float. We also say cout, and then we want our double value, which is d, and then we say double value, like that. So if we run our program, we'll be able to, oh, my mistake, I'm running the wrong program. So if we run our program, we'll be able to see the following. Okay, our int value is giving us a wrong figure, but the next two are giving us the actual figures that we've input. I'm not sure why that is the case. Okay, let's also just put our end line for each of these elements. Okay, so this way we can be able to see what each element does. I'm not sure why our integer value is not giving us the right output. Let's just see, did we miss anything? Okay, let's just try and do that and see if it will change anything. And then this is 10. Let's make it maybe a 60. But I doubt that is our problem. There should just be something simpler. But everything else is giving us exactly what we put. Interesting. Interesting. There should be something that I'm missing, but I haven't figured it out as yet. But let's get into explaining how each of these elements work. So we are saying the moment we've got our union, which is numbers, and our union numbers then contains the following. It contains the keyword, which is numbers, which has these values, and each of these values are members of our union. So our union is then called numbers, and then these are members of our union. The moment we want to then initialize our union, we then come here and we use the keyword union, we use the keyword that is our numbers, and then we use our n1. Our n1 then gives us an option to add or to use any of these members so that we can use them within our program or within what we are hoping to use our program for. So what this then means, the moment we are then initializing each of these elements, for example, there, we are saying we want to get union member, assign value to member I. So in other words, we're getting into a union, we're getting into our data structure, we are then picking a value, and then we want to initialize or assign a value to it. And then at this particular instance, we then want to display that value. And in that particular instance, we've actually worked with our union, and our union has been called or has been referenced according to how we have declared. So that is how our union works and how we can call our union using our referencing or our reference point. This also applies to the next element we want to work with, which is our structure. And then our structure works with the keyword struct, and then we put a name of whatever element we want to use within our structure. So we can say users. This then means with our structure, we can put values that we want to have. So we can have a string, which is our element. So we can have f name. We can also have a string, which is our L name. We can also have a int age, and then we can also have a character gender, like that. So with our structure, it then works in the following manner, or with the following concept. We then put struct, and then we put users, and then we put our identifier, which can be U1, which then identifies what our structure does. So we still have the same concept with our union, whereby this is creating our structure. Then these become our members for the structure. Then this becomes our reference to our structure. From there, we can then start putting the elements that we want to see. So we can have cout. Our cout then prompts for enter first name. Line. We then put a cin to get our first name. So to get our first name, we need to have our u1 dot first name, and then we put a semicolon. We do the same thing for our last name. We put a cin. We then put our u1 dot last name. We do the same for our next value, which would be end line. Let's actually put the values. So we want to enter last name. We also want to enter age, and then we put a cin u1.age, and then we want to cout. We want to enter the gender. Your gender. And then we put an end line, and then with our end line we put a cin. We then put u1 dot gender, and then we are good to go. So what this then means, at each of these elements, we want to then get an input and then view what that input was. So if we run the program, we should be able to get sorry, let me just access that program. We should be able to get our values. So we can put a first name, surname, we can put an age, we can put a gender, like that. So as it stands, we've also initialized our variables in a slightly different way, but we've also managed to access our union, and our structure. So we want to continue with where we left off, or from where we left off, and we want to add another variation of our data structures. And then this data structure will have similar concepts to the two data structures we've looked at so far, but it will have a slightly different twist to it. So with this data structure, we can be able to modify it or play with it to get an output of whatever it is that we want to achieve or bring out as part of our project or within our project. So the data structure we want to work with is called a class, and we can have a class called horse. Okay, as you can see, it matches up with the previous data structures, that we still work with a keyword, and our keyword would be class, and then we then have the class name. But in this instance, we can then be able to put a public, which will then mean whatever we have put in the public sphere is accessible within this class. So gives access to members in the class. So at the same time, since we've got public, we can also have private, whereby in the same class we can say certain values or certain attributes might not be accessible within a certain confine or a certain construct. So the moment we put public and private, would then need to have an example of private to see how that works. But for the purposes of this example, let's have just the elements that we want to work with. So we have color as the first variable that we've got. We also want int age. We also want int its weight, like that. So we'll then get three variables or three elements that we want to look at. We then come to our main function, and with our main function we then put horse, and then we put our key identifier, which can be H or R. At the same time now, this becomes our class identifier. At the same time, we then want to initialize these elements and see how we do it with a class. So put our H or R, and then you put our dot, and then you put the age. We want the age to be equal to 8. We do the same for the next element. We want the color, and the color, since it's a string, we then need to put a string element, where our string element would then give us a color. So we can put our color as brown. At the same time, we also want HOR dot its weight, and then we want to put a weight that will be showing that we've got the weight of our horse. So at the same time now, we then want to just display what this information gives us. So we can put a C out, and then our C out, we then say the horse is, and then we want brown. So since we want our brown, we put HOR dot color, and then we put some more text and state that it is and then we put HOR dot age. We then put years old, and we then put our and. We want to put HOR dot weight, we need to put our last part of the string, kgs in weight. We then put our end line, and then our program should be done. So before we run it, let's just explain it a bit, or let's explain parts of our content so that we see what we are talking about. We create a class, and the class name is horse. We then have public elements that we want to be able to be accessed from this class, which is string, age, and its weight. We then come to our main function. We have our horse.hor is our class identifier. HOR.age is our age. HOR.color is our color. HOR, its weight is its weight. And then we want to display this output. So let's just run it and see if we've not made a mistake. And we can then take it from there. So we've got our output, and here's what our output is. The horse is brown. It is 8 years old and 180 kgs in weight. We actually forgot to put something after this. The horse is brown in color. It is years old and it's whatever in weight. Let's run it and then see if our correction is there. The horse is brown in color. It is 8 years old and it's 180 kgs in weight. 8 years old, so we need a space there. So the horse is brown in color and it is 8 years old and it's 180 kgs in weight. So given that, we have simply created our class or worked with our class so that we've got something that is user friendly and can be used for our class. So we want to move on from the simple class, or making our class as simple as it was. So we would want to add a few things to our class so that we can learn how a class works. So the following steps would be quite a lot, but I'll try and explain each step as we proceed, because we're simply saying we can be able to work with our classes, and then our class can have variations that help us to understand what a class does and what we should learn from our class. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put data structure, and then we say class modified. That's what we want to call our class. So let's get started. So we've seen what our class does in its simplest form. Let's create another class, and it's horse, similar to the first class that we've created. The next thing we want to do is we want to have a public, and then public then has our variables, which will be as follows. We want to create our variables plus set those variables to give us the elements that we would hope to work with, or the elements that we think would be relevant for use within our class. So here's what we'll need to do. We'll need to have a group of elements that we think should be private. So we need to have some set functions and some get functions. We would also need to initialize each of these elements. So we can start with the get functions, then we get to our set functions. I think that would make life a little bit easier for us. So the first function would be an int, and then we say get age. So we want to get the age of the horse. Would want a void get color, and with our color we also need a void get weight, so that we can be able to get these values. So these we call them get functions. And then from there, outside of the get functions, we want to have set functions. And these functions will then be used to set values that we want to set in our content. So to set, we simply put void set age, and our age will then have an int age. From there, we have a void set color, and then we also have a void set weight. We open and we close brackets, and then we've got our elements. So we would need a string to get our color. Would also need an int to get our weight. So given that, we can now be able to initialize these functions. So a get function should be able to get something that we want to use for our document or our content. And our set should then be able to initialize that value which we have actually initially got from our get function, and we then set that value to our particular element that we would want to be able to work with. From there, we then put a private, which then means this is private to this particular function, and then this then becomes int age for the horse's age, int age weight for the horse's weight, and then string age color for the horse's color. This then means we are done with our function. We also then need to initialize these concepts or these elements so that the elements can be able to run through our class or our class elements. So the next stage is now setting how these elements will work together. So I think let me set each element by each element so that it becomes easier to grasp how this works. So we put an int, and we put our horse, and then we put two colons, and then we want to set the age. That's the first thing that we want to set. So set age will have int age. But before we do that, I think we're supposed to start with the get function. My mistake. So we put an int, we put our horse, and then our horse will then have to get the age, get age, uh, we get the age, and then we want to return its age, like that. So here's how this should function. We get our horse, which is this bit, and then want to get age, and then this age we want to return the age, so its age is our age. So my mistake, my mistake, my mistake, it's I age, which is what we've got there. Sorry, I was thinking of the last program that we did. So we've got int horse, and then we get age. Getting our age will return age, which is this age. So this becomes complete. Although this part, I think we did it wrongly because we want to get a void, not an int. So we need to put a void there. The reason why it's void because our set age is a void. So we need a void horse, and then we get our age, and then this age would then be our age, like that, is equal to our age. Okay, so how is this working? We're saying the moment we get to void horse, we're simply saying would want to be able to put an age in our set age, which will eventually come back to our get age and return the value that we have put in this particular function. So that's what we are doing there. Let me do the next two examples. Hopefully it gets easier whilst we're working with examples or when we are having examples that we can reference. And it becomes something that we can learn, finish up, and be able to use for our learning. So the next thing we want to use is int horse, like we've done there. And then the horse should then get color. So to get our color, we then want to return our variable for color, which in this case is age color. Right. So as we're typing age color, we get age color because it's a variable that we've put as private. So it means the moment we can access the horse, it's only private to that particular instance, which is the horse. And it's also saying the moment we put these two dots, we're actually getting into get color, and get color is a part of our horse, and get color can access private elements within our horse. So we can then be able to use get color in that regard. At the same time, we can also put void horse, and then we put our columns, and then we want to say set color like that. This then means we can then initialize our color, which is h color is equal to our color. Okay, so I also need to make sure that I put my string color there so that we don't get an error. And then this then means I've actually set my value for my color. The last thing I need to do is set my weight. So let's go for the last bit, which is int weight, int horse, and int horse is equal to my get weight, and my get weight should return my h weight. Return h weight like that. So we are good to go. And then we go to my void horse. We put the two things and then we set weight. So for my weight, I would need to have my h weight being equal to my weight. I think I'd put it as weight. Yes, int weight. So this becomes int weight like that. Perfect. So at this particular instance, we are working with the horse's age. We are giving value for the age. We are also working with the color. We are giving the value for the color. We are working with the weight. We are then giving the value of the weight. Okay, so given that it might not make sense now, let's get into our work. So with our work, we then want to initialize our horse. So our horse, we then put horse, and then we put h for horse, and then we want to then set our values. So it's h dot set age. We'll need an age that's an integer, so let's put 8. We put age dot set color. We then want our color to be brown. We also want age dot set weight, and we want our weight to be 180 like that. So if we run it, we don't get an output. Okay, get color. I think I made a mistake somewhere. Get color and get color. Okay, let's put void there. I think that's our problem. Okay, error return statement value missing void from. Okay, let me just figure out what is happening here so that we finish up.